Hello, everyone. A very big welcome to everyone who's joined us here today. I see that we are currently at 19 people, so I'm just going to wait about 30 seconds to a minute to make sure that everyone's here before we get started. Okay, I see the numbers are starting to rise, so that's good. Okay, so let's get going. Firstly, thank you everyone for taking the time and spending time with us here today. We are joined by Andile, who's going to be our expert in house to make sure this experience is smooth for everybody. Any technical difficulties, anything we may face, she's on standby to make sure everything's going to be smooth. Myself, I'm Swami, the local SEO expert here at Partoo. Today, I'm joined by my good friend Ashish, who is the business communications and partnerships lead at Google for the APAC region. For those of you who are meeting us here for the first time today, Google and Partoo have been trusted partners for several years. With Google's support, we've been actively participating in the evolution of new features, products based on customer feedback. What originally started out as a strong collaboration here in Europe has now stretched across the world, all the way from Mexico to India. Pleasure to have you here, Ashish. Over to you.
Hey Swami, it's great to be here. And a big hi to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're happy to welcome you to the event. I can already see there are some colleagues from Google who are there in the session. So please go ahead and drop us a message in the chat to tell us which company you're representing and what is the area of your interest. So Swami, while we wait for folks to share details, can you please share a bit more on the agenda?
Sure, absolutely, Ashish. And I already see some familiar faces too. I can see Isha. Hi, Isha. I see Saloni. See Rabba. Hello. Hi, Mol. Okay.
Hey
And
Priyanka.
wonderful. So, yeah, Ashish. So, today, and everyone, today we'll be spending 30 minutes together to go over everything that you need to know about Google Business Messages, driving enhanced customer support and improved conversions. Really talking about the business impact of messages. What are the advantages for the brands that have already adopted it, and really showcasing a case study from one of our clients. And finally, showing you a real life demo on how to access and centralize all your messages through Partoo. And at the end of the day, our tips to prepare you and how you can implement it internally at your organization. We will also have 30 minutes at the end for questions and answers to really go over all the topics we'll be discussing today. And of course, Ashish is right there for you to discuss any plans and any specific details you'd like to know about messages. Of course, we highly encourage you to please ask us for questions during our presentation. We'll either answer them as we go along or go over them towards the end during our Q&A session. Now, right before we get started, could you please let us know how many of you knew about Google Business Messages before joining us here today? Okay. All right. I'm starting to see some responses on the chat. And okay, that's on me. So we also have a poll feature during the webinar, right? So if you guys see on your screen on the right side, you have the chat option. And to the left of the chat option, there is a poll feature. So you can also drop in your polls. But moving forward, every time we add a poll, we'll make sure that we notify you. But on the chat, I see that messages are fairly new. So pleasure to have everyone. So really looking forward to go over what messages are. So let's get right into it. So over to you, Ashish.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone for sharing your feedback, and definitely messages is a new feature that we launched last year, right? So straight to jump into the product. What are we talking about, right? The product that we want to discuss today is Google's Business Messages. It is a very new conversational channel which has been designed to allow users to start messaging from any of your Google Business Profile listings, including your sales outlets, branches, or service centers. On the business profile page, users are presented with the prompt to simply click on the chat button to get started. Once in the conversation, they can then send messages to the respective outlets as in the photo on the right. These conversations can be a great way for prospective customers to go get more info about a product they have been buying to buy, or an existing customer reaching out for support. It's a very simple, practical, and intuitive product designed to elevate the customer experience across all your Google profile listings. Now, just because there's a product, it does not mean that it would find taking in the market, right? So it's very important to understand the context behind it and why is it important, right? So three core reasons. First, over last 2 years, definitely, there is an upsurge of customers who are walking into the stores, but before they do that, they search online. In fact, it's estimated 74% of in-store shoppers today search online before going into a store to a shop. And 92% of them would be searching online and they would have started their journey on Google. But for these prospective customers, most experiences today would be designed to make them call these businesses. And this leads to a lot of phone calls for businesses. And as you can see the number, it is as much as 250 billion calls being made to businesses every year. And these calls could be around a host of reasons. It could be to get information about product availability, prices, opening hours, payments, or delivery methods, and the list goes on. The cost of this answering these phone calls, it adds up to about $1.1 trillion, which is almost equivalent to the size of Australia's GDP. And while these calls come in, retailers cannot focus on their core businesses and provide expertise to the customers. But beyond the cost, I think the most important thing is it's a poor experience for users, and several of us will relate to that. Waiting on the call is not great. It causes a threat to the brand image and the relationship with the customers, which is actually on the line here, right? Now, there is a solution for this, of course, and the what we think is and what our bet is to kind of adopt messaging. And there are very simple and intuitive reasons behind it, right? All of us as users, we can look at ourselves, we are spending more time messaging with friends and family than being on the calls. And the same trend is carrying over to business communications as well. At Google, we did a survey and we found roughly 67% of respondents prefer to send messages to shops rather than call them. Last 2 years, of course, have been very complex to say the least. Supply problems during pandemic have led to delivery delays and frequent stockouts. Thus, users today anticipate their purchases and want to get confirmation of stock availability before heading out to shop. In fact, searches on Google for in-store inventory has increased by roughly 8,000% or 8x between 2020 and 2021. This is something which I can definitely relate to. Over last few months, there have been times where I had to visit several stores to find that one specific product that I'm looking for. And finally, with the advancement in the NLP processing, natural language processing, users are able to get high quality experience on a chatbot, allowing brands to gain efficiency and scale by automating common queries. So this is why we think that messaging as a channel is today designed to better handle business communications needs, which your customers are expecting out of you, right? But as is true for any other product, at Google, we know that users traverse across a wide range of channels, depending on their preferences and their need states. So even within business messages, we made sure that customers would seamlessly find you across whichever environment they find themselves in, whether it is starting or refining a search on Google, or looking up a retail storefront on Google Maps, researching on your products on mobile website, or the coolest one, which I really love, chat option for enabled businesses. When users attempt to dial the call center number or the store number, messages as an option comes up directly. What this means is, as a business, you can be there for every customer and deliver a personalized conversational experience in real time, right from your customer's channel of choice. And we just didn't stop there. To make it even more impactful, what we did was we launched a host of rich and assisted features to kind of deliver an intuitive experience which can be delightful and engaging for users. And the way we have gone about doing that is to ensure that there is a capability to define an excellent welcome message. because a good impression always start with a excellent welcome message. And we have something called as a conversation starters, which can be cues for the customers to kind of get started. We also ensure that whenever any conversation comes into you, you're always context aware in a very intuitive fashion that which particular store or location customers are coming in for. So no need to kind of second guess the customer location by asking them to input their PIN code and stuff. Of course, as you expand, there is an ability to kind of implement a carousel with images and buttons to improve customer experience when using the channel. And finally, it's to build a long-lasting relationship. It's not just important that you answer the question, customer's query then and there, but you have an ability to re-engage with them. So on the channel, the way we have designed it is that as long as users initiate that message, as a business, you have about 30 days of re-engagement window available to you to kind of get back to users. But from our standpoint, we want to make sure that there are high quality experiences which are getting enabled. So Google always reserves the right to disable the feature if messages are not being processed within 24 hours, which means that the businesses are not responsive. So we'll always recommend you to not activate this feature right away unless you have clear defined management rules. And adopting an integrated solution with Partoo will simplify your management of this new messaging system. So Swami, why don't you share with us like what are the feature sets that you've built and how you've gone about implementing Google Business Messages with Partoo suite?
Absolutely, Ashish. Thank you for this in-depth introduction to Google Business Messages. Right? So before we go down that road, we wanted to really put into perspective the major technological evolutions of the last few years and how they've really changed the way brands interact with customers. What we observe is that every 10 years or so, a small revolution takes place where technological evolution changes the paradigm. It all started with the invention of the mainframe or the macrocomputer with unprecedented processing power for the time, followed by the desktop in the 90s and the appearance of the internet. I still remember the days when we had dial up internet growing up. So if you received a phone call, then the internet connection was meddled with. And I think to download a photograph, you had to wait minutes and it could be messed with. So it really when the internet came about, it offered a new showcase for brands, and very quickly a new means of communication and transaction. And right about that time, we were also at the beginning of what we call today e-commerce. Around 2007, 2008, a new revolution took place with the emergence of the smartphone. Really allowed everybody to have internet access and a computer pretty much directly in their pocket. This in turn transformed the digital relationship between consumers and brands. New uses were created and consumer expectations drastically changed. Today, the word customer journey has become a household name, but back then, really, this was when people are starting to map the different phases, starting from discovery, starting from intention of purchase, all the way to conversion. The latest revolution today is that of the artificial intelligence, which, with new calculation capacities and access to data, offers formidable innovations. This will also allow the emergence of new conversational models that will rethink and recreate brand and customer interactions. Thanks to Google Business Messages, you can now enhance your customer experience by connecting with clients and prospects where they expect you to find you these days. What we can expect tomorrow are discussions that will quite likely lead to consultative commerce or assisted decision making. For example, you say you want to run a marathon and ask for recommendations for running shoes. The brand can suggest the most suitable shoes based on the information it already has about you. The brand will be able to confirm not only the availability, but also suggest to you to buy them online with all the information already filled in for you. This in turn limits friction and therefore facilitates conversion for the customer. The average conversion rate in shops today is around 20 to 30%, whereas online, this rate falls to less than 10%. The primary reason for this is due to the fact that there is no salesperson to guide you, to answer your questions, and provide you enough information to convince you to purchase. In the context of conversational commerce, the aim really is to reduce this gap and provide advice to potential customers, and therefore the conversation rates will mechanically increase to similar heights as at the store level. The next step to take really advantage of the possibilities offered by messaging is to extend the experience after the purchase in order to create greater brand affinity and therefore a better lifetime value for the consumer. This is when it becomes interesting for marketing teams more than anything. If we take our example of the marathon, we can improve the customer experience by offering peripheral content, in this case, sports tutorials to improve performance. So here we have an experience that goes really beyond the commercial relationship and puts the customer at the center of the conversation. And if you really think about it, the possibilities here are immense. Before we move on, I have another question for everyone. Which company here already has a marketing strategy in place on messaging platforms like Google, Facebook Messenger, Instagram, or WhatsApp? And again, you can drop us your answers in the chat right below on the screen.
There's also the poll that you can just click the button.
All right. Thank you, Andy. Okay. All right. As and when we gather responses on the poll and also on the chat, we will quickly now take a look at some of the advantages for the brands that have already adopted this feature and also really showcase a case study from one of our clients that was one of the early adopters. So today we'll look into real life case study from Stellantis and you, and what were their objectives, what are the challenges that they had originally, and really look closer into numbers and what kind of results they achieved. So the main context to take into account here is everything that happened here is thanks to the work of Partoo and also that of Stellantis teams. The forms were viewed much more often and generated more actions from customers. In fact, there was an increase of 38% in calls to actions. And we also noticed that primarily these calls to actions were phone calls. For Stellantis, there was a desire to reduce call center costs and really get closer to customers thanks to messaging. They deployed the solution for 183 locations across Europe while being centrally managed by each country with global coordination. In other words, in each country, there was a marketing manager in charge of the project and one or two operators responsible for answering messages with a script for the beginning and ending of the conversation. In terms of objectives, their challenge was ambitious. They wanted 100% of messages that had to be processed. They also wanted to answer 80% of these messages in less than 5 minutes. And 20% of these leads had to be generated through this new messaging channel. And the results were really worth the challenge. In just over 2 months, if you notice on the slide here, the number of conversations increased by over 8 times. This is an unequivocal observation that is characterized by the fact that we all use messaging in our daily lives to communicate. People are already used to using this channel to text their friends, family, to send messages to maybe during interactions with their colleagues, etc. So really, there was not a major change in terms of people's behavior. Rather, what we understood was this gave the customers to have an opportunity to be ever closer and more proactive with their merchants. To give you a bit more concrete numbers from Stellantis and you, in France, for 107 locations, they had more than 400 conversations with customers. This represents more than 3,000 messages that was received to them. So roughly about 7 messages per conversation with a potential customer. The key points to note from Stellantis are that 61% of the messages were related to purchasing intentions. Now, really coming back to originally how they started out this project was to cut down on the call center costs because it represented a significant portion of their calls to action. However, what they understood at the end of this exercise is that 61% of the messages actually directly had some purchasing intent, whether it was about price, requesting a quote, an appointment, etc. Um, the remaining 31% was, of course, related to support or practical information. I mean, even though this case was something we saw in France, Ashish, maybe have you seen some cases similar in other markets, maybe in India as well?
Oh, definitely. I think these insights pretty much relate on point to what we are seeing in India as well. And just to kind of share a bit of context, when the product was originally designed, it was more designed from a perspective of offering one more way for people to connect for support queries, right? And I can see a question on the chat by Vijay, where he has posted that are they simply used as an alternate to calls? That is where we started the product with. But once we rolled it out, and the feedback that we've seen from the users, from brands, from merchants and partners, is that increasingly users are finding it valuable for more and more purchase decisions. Think of it yourself. Today we are exposed to brand imagery, to different kind of stimuli all throughout the day, right? So if I'm looking at buying a car, it's not necessary that I would have that intent to purchase during those business hours, right? But if it is the call, which is the only action point, I'll probably be restricted or I'll miss that opportunity of window to kind of get in touch with the user. What messaging allows is a kind of an asynchronous mode of communication. I can drop in a message and I drop it at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? I'm a night owl. I'm not worried and I drop it in. Business can just respond it then and there saying that, hey, we're offline now, but we'll have somebody get in touch with you when we come online. So that kind of a functionality that expands the overall distribution, it expands the overall breadth of what can happen. And we really see this coming to life in India as well. For one of the major automobile OEMs, when they rolled it out, and they've rolled it out across 1,000+ dealership locations, in a matter of few months, they were able to start seeing almost 400, 500 high intent purchase conversations start coming in, and people being very specific that I'm looking for this and this car model, this variant, this color in this city. Can you have somebody get in touch with me? Now, this is always possible that somebody would have called that up, but increasingly the feedback we are seeing from brands is that this is leading to an incremental value being delivered from brands by expanding this channel. So yeah, definitely it is a trend which is cutting across multiple markets. It is definitely very strong in a market like India, where messaging is very strongly used as a normal consumer behavior.
Wonderful. That's what I thought so too, Ashish. So moving over, really now, let's take a look at how you can access and centralize these messages because already maybe some of you are thinking, okay, if I'm getting messages from hundreds of locations, how can I take a look into them? And is there a way that I can really get back to all these client concerns? The good news is, of course, there is. So I'll tell you a bit more about what we are developing here at Partoo, and really what is our solution to help you to facilitate this on your for your teams. How we've really built the product is sticking true to the values of Partoo. Is at the end of the day provide a simple and intuitive solution that is adapted not only to in-store usage but also enables good collaboration with the central marketing teams. In other words, at a store level, very easy for people to really handle their business concerns. And for the central teams, very easy for you to always keep an eye on exactly what's happening, and any strategic decisions, anywhere where there's some intervention needed, you of course have the power and the means to enable and get into it. So, quickly, the three strong advantages of our messages product. Number one, centralization. In real time, fetching all the messages across all your locations, centralizing it, and providing you the option to have a bird's eye view. Second, simplicity. At the end of the day, really getting from problem to solution in the quickest way possible and the simplest way possible. Finally, organization. We are constantly working hand in hand with teams and getting feedback from them in terms of their ideas and their ways of internally organizing the resources. For example, you may already have established teams that are taking care of your ORM, taking care of customer support, etc. How can we fit into the picture and make sure that your existing setup can seamlessly coincide with our solution, and at the end of the day save a lot of time and also improve the customer support that is being provided? And as Ashish rightly pointed out, a strong element is also purchase intent here. How can we integrate these elements within your teams and really ensure that we can build on to your existing business process and make it easier and improve it? I know that that is a lot of words that I've just thrown in a minute. So why don't we take a look at the product itself and how can we really help you to do all these things in real time? Let's take a look at it. So as I pull up the platform on my end, could everyone quickly open up your Google Maps and search for Partoo Paris? I'm going to put it down on the chat as well, please. Let's take about 30 seconds when everyone drops in their
Ju-
messages. But
Just one call out, Swami. So it'll be helpful if you search for this from your mobile devices. So whether you're using Android or iOS, just go to Google Maps and search for Partoo Paris over there. As of now, this is a mobile first experience. So yeah, that will be required.
thanks, Ashish. So I think we are about good to go. So for the people already familiar to this beautiful background, you know what Partoo looks like. For the others, that is Partoo. So that every time you log on to Partoo, that is your as the first place you land on. This is where you can see all your businesses. Now, for the context of this particular discussion, every time when you receive either a new message or a review, you have a red dot that appears on the screen right here. As I mentioned to you, we fetch messages in live. Let's find out if we actually do that. Okay, I click right here and I see messages. Here we go. Okay, so we have about 5 messages in the last minute. Hello, Andy. Okay, and Gaurav. Hello. And Varun brings up a very good argument here. Sorry, Varun.
And we have
Uh,
a solution for that as well. So we can cover that.
Ashish will elaborate about it in a minute. Okay. Okay. So, Kritika, salut. Okay, wonderful. So as you can see here, in real time, we gather all the messages, and you can fetch them here. And of course, in this scenario, this is messages for all your businesses. However, one thing that you can do with Part 2, for example, if you're a business with multiple locations, maybe 50, maybe 100, maybe 500, spread across different regions in India, what you can already do is set up groups. These could be groups really based on geography or maybe based on business units, right? You're the boss, you know how to organize things internally. Once that is done, you can take a look at messages based on the different groups that you've set up, or you can also take a look at these messages based on cities, or maybe if you think your store teams can reply to messages because these are really specific with a strong local intent, then you can open access at a local level. And what will happen is your store teams will only gather messages for that individual business. That is how it works today. Three main things to note. And of course, already you can drop on the chat. What do you think about all these features? Does it look good? Drop us a kind note or drop us a not so kind note if you think something can be improved too. Please do. And in the meantime, three main things to note. What happens is you can set up a welcome message, right? So I, the customer, as and when I drop onto your chat, you can set up a welcome message to already maybe guide me towards somewhere in the business. Maybe this message could say, hello, nice to meet you. Do you have a question that is specific to maybe operations? Would you like to know if the store is open or not? Or is there a question specific to maybe product stock, etc.? What that can help you to do is already begin the discussion and provide the customer a first touch point and guide them towards where you want them to go. Right? That's number one. Second thing you can do is to set up a store. Set up a message outside of business hours. Let's say that, like Ashish mentioned, at 2 a.m. he dropped in a message. What he can do is give them the next best action to do when you're not available. Maybe ask them, hey, we're outside of business hours, but if it's a query related to XYZ, you can do this action and we'll get back to you at 9 a.m. IST, for example. And the final thing, you can also send them a goodbye message at the end of the interaction. It's possible. And Ashish has an interesting question. Okay. So he wants to know, do you have a similar plant in your store? And as you can notice, it also supports images. Unfortunately, Ashish, we don't have a similar plant today in the office, but that is a good looking plant, if I can say. All right. So one last thing before I stop sharing my screen and we come back to the discussion is really interesting thing to note about messages is that you can keep track of the conversations. For example, let's say that you had a customer that sent a message saying, hey, do you have this product in stock? And maybe today it wasn't in stock, or maybe they had a specific request that you can't provide today. These conversations are stored, and you can always go back and then get back to this customer. So there's always not only a question of acquisition, but also a strong element of re-engagement with your customers. So that is something also to take into consideration when we were talking about messages. So maybe Ashish, is there something that you'd like to add? Is there something that maybe I missed out on?
No, that's perfect. I think just to kind of build upon that. So for example, to my question that whether you have planned and stored right now or not, you mentioned it's not there, right? But if you have it after a week or so later, you can respond to me on the same message, on the same thread saying, you know what, this is a new collection which you got coming in. Why don't you come in and check it out? So that's the value kind of which gets unlocked. However, for anything which is new, it's important to kind of have your prep in place, right? It's not about launching it. It's also about landing the impact with all such features. So few things which we think can be helpful in terms of helping you get ready for this transformation. The first thing is to kind of prepare. Make sure that the journeys that you have, the use cases that you're trying to tackle are very clearly laid out, right? Uh, and I think more than a tool, it's an organization which kind of requires this kind of a transformation. I saw it in the chat as well. There are people who are asking, do we need to hire more people? Maybe the answer to that is no. So what is the most efficient way for us to deploy this? Have people who are supporting this initiative, right? And we can also provide you analysis and a dashboard to help you monitor the number of conversations and messages. But more important than that, it will be most important to track the customer satisfaction. What are the consumer journeys that you're able to unlock with this? Is your CSAT score going up? Is it leading to a better outcome in terms of higher sales per walk-in? And when the conversation is over, we of course send a notification back to the users. So you can kind of keep a track of the conversation going ahead as well. So these are the few things which we think would be helpful. And again, on the product, it's important. It's feasible for you to deploy it selected locations. So you can, if you have 100 stores, if you so choose to, you can start off with 10 stores, see how the progress is, iterate upon it, align your internal processes, your responses, and then only scale it up after that.
Thanks, Ashish. Just for the virtue of time, so we have not so much time left for the question Q&A, of course. If people can stay back, more than happy to answer all the questions. So I'm going to quickly run through what is Partoo itself. And I was looking at everyone who's on the attendees, and there's some of them thinking, here we go again. I've already heard this from you before. So I'm going to make it very quick. For people joining us here for the first time, Partoo is a SaaS company. Today we have about over 600 clients, and we operate in around 100 countries, helping 300,000 stores as of today. Really, primarily, everything we're trying to do here at Partoo is to help you to manage your online presence and really build the bridge between your online presence and your offline footprint. When we think of online presence, we provide a solution that helps you to be sure that all the information that's out there is really under your control. It's consistent, it's updated, it's accurate, and also solutions that kind of build everything and put everything together in terms of managing your reviews, as we've seen today, managing your messages, building a more positive reputation on the internet, gathering more reviews, building a store locator, etc. For the virtue of time again, for the moment, I'm going to stop this very brief introduction right there. Of course, we will drop in an email with the replay of the webinar and how you can reach me. If you'd be interested to know more, I'd be happy to get in touch with you and have a chat. So, on that note, I'm going to say a very big thank you to everybody for spending time with us today and really switch over to questions. And maybe we can start already with the chat, Ashish, and we can go over the questions and start answering them as we go. Please do drop in the questions anyone else has. We've gone through a lot of information. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, let's start. I think there are a lot of questions that we've not tackled so far. So let's start from the top. I think the first question which came in from Priyanka was that it is a guided chat box or monitored by agents. So I mentioned that yes, you can have both a live agent response coming in to kind of handle all your conversations, and as you kind of build scale, you can kind of design an automated journey. If you have an existing chatbot, then kind of figure out a way to connect it with that, or like as you evolve, you kind of automate some sessions which are there. The next question was, we have WhatsApp business messaging in place. How is it different from integrating WhatsApp bot? So I think one thing to call out very clearly is that uh, Google Business Messages in itself is not a it's not an end-to-end implementation. What we're offering is just a a channel. So if you have a channel on which messaging is enabled, right, whether it's on WhatsApp or other OTT platforms, you're potentially already mapped out the use cases that you're seeing on that, whether it's for purchase or for support, right? So what you can do is you can look at Google Business Messages as being a way to kind of expand surfaces for those experiences. Today, probably you'll have to guide users and inform them that how do you find them, how do they find you on WhatsApp today, right? Instead of that, on this, the journey is fairly intuitive. I think Vijay had this question that how will people find this experience, right? How will they come to discover it? So the beauty of the product is it is built into organic search. So moment you enable this feature, from the next day onward, even if you don't tell anyone about it, people will start finding it on their own. And that is what Google does very well. Google search is best designed to kind of pick up the right user intent and offer the most efficient path for customers to kind of achieve those intents. And wherever we think that messaging is the best way to kind of solve that intent for that brand, then the messaging button will come up on its own. So like if you enable it across 1,000 stores, every time people are searching for your store locations, either for reaching out to your store or finding information, chat will be available as an option and they can start using it there. Gaurav has a question. I think Vijay has a question that are they used simply as an alternative to calls, or are there any differences? So yes, one core difference that we covered was that messaging is asynchronous. So it allows you to kind of handle it at scale. The second thing is that you can kind of better understand the user intent at scale on messaging. there is a brand. What they're doing is they're kind of using these chats to kind of understand what kind of customer responses or what kind of sales executives are better equipped to convert the leads. Because if it's a call conversation, it's very difficult for you to track at the end of the month. Here I got 1,000 incoming calls and I was able to convert only 50 of them into a leads. But if you have messaging, you can pretty much easily deploy some NLP tools to kind of process that information and kind of understand the patterns and trends, which will lead to better outcomes. Can this be integrated into existing CRM platforms? Of course, it can be. I think we should discuss in detail on like what are the integration paths and which existing CRM products that you're using. Swami, do you want to take this one? Do we need to
Sure.
hire more resources to handle messages? Seems like we
Um,
might have too much to handle, which is a good problem to have. But yeah,
Thanks, Ashish. That is definitely a good problem to have. So it's really going to come down to how, as I mentioned before, how you're currently splitting your internal resources in terms of if you have a dedicated customer support teams or in teams, etc. In terms of hiring more resources on the surface, the answer would be a no, because as Ashish mentioned, one of the things we're also trying to do is take a chunk of calls that are historically, the resources are your internal resources are handling, and transition them into messages that are smoother, and you can provide a better customer experience. So if you already have internal resources that can handle calls for you, definitely you don't need to hire more resources to handle messages. But again, it's going to depend on context and exactly where we are. So Vijay, why don't you drop me a message later and we can get to know a bit more about your particular business case. And next one seems interesting also, Ashish, for me. So I'm just going to take that from Gaurav. Would love to have a centralized platform for all RM practices, existing for a lot of products. Does GMB messaging review be integrated into it? Absolutely. That can be done, Gaurav, because we also provide an end-to-end solution for reviews from Google. Same thing as you saw on messaging, real-time real-time fetching of messages and reviews, and also we provide you analytics. Something we didn't see on the product demo is that today you can run numbers and you can see in terms of how many messages you're having in a conversation, how often are you replying to these messages, what is the exact impact, etc. So there's also strong analytics that comes with both reviews and also messaging as part of Partoo. Gaurav, I'll be happy to again go in depth with you if you, well, I'll drop you a message. Don't worry about it. So going down to, is there any time limit to respond to the messages? Yes, Vijay, as Ashish pointed out earlier, Andy has already responded. We recommend within 24 hours to respect Google rules. Thank you.
I
Okay,
can
so
like add a little bit of more color to that, if I may. So there are a couple of metrics that we track. The North Star metrics for us is customer satisfaction, right? So of course we understand there will be cases in point where it's not feasible for the executives to kind of respond in time. What we are keeping a tab of is the aggregate score for brands. As long as the aggregate metrics in terms of CSAT scores, in terms of merchant response rate, which is basically the number of conversations which came in and how many of them were responded in time. As long as at an aggregate level, it is well in the quality parameter, that's fine. Of course, if it is an aggregate level, those metrics start to fall. That is when I think there'll be some intervention and we'll want to come back and work with you to kind of figure out what is causing those challenges and how can we help tackle that. Yes, Swami, back to you.
yeah,
I think
so I
we've
think
answered most of
Shriji
the
had a
questions.
question. Okay, Andy's already answered. I'm just gonna say it out loud so in case someone missed the chat.
Perfect.
Yeah, so access to chats, will it be through an individual dashboard? Yes, one platform, the dashboard, that you can also track your customer satisfaction and other KPIs, thanks to Google survey. Okay, so yeah, Google automatically sends a survey, as Ashish pointed out, to customers to complete after chat is finished. Vijay has a question: which industries might benefit the most from this feature? So I think this one's for you, Ashish. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that any brand, more than the industry, I think any brand which does get a lot of inbound user interest on their Google business profiles, right? They stand to gain the most, because what would happen is that there is today a lot of impressions which are getting generated across your profiles, and high probability that a lot of them is going unaddressed. Again, there are categories where each of those impressions can have significantly higher business value. So if it is a product category like automotive, or if it is an omni-channel retail, where for retailers, it's very important to kind of convert more and more walk-ins, drive more walk-ins to the store, make sure there's a value maximization which is happening across each of those touch points. I think those categories will stand to gain the most. And finally, even the BFSI category, again, people are looking for, there are more and more complex products which are out there. And increasingly, brands want to still have, or banks and financial institutions, though they have physical presence, they want to kind of offer a digital experience to their customers. So this becomes like a bridge in that sense. If there are walk-ins happening, if they want to moderate that out, they can use that. So yeah, that's how I would urge you to think about it. But as Swami mentioned, I think which will be helpful to kind of have a follow-up discussion to kind of understand this in better.
And really to add to that, Ashish, since this is a fairly new feature and we are exploring customer behavior, really understanding what people want. For example, automotive sector, historically, we might think that is something where people would want to go at the dealer level, test drive the car, and do everything. So when you told me 61% strong purchasing intent, so that was a bit of a surprise for me, purely based on industry. And that tells me that only with experimentation, only with time, will we understand how customers behave and what they want with the feature for specific industries, right? So I'd say for the moment, maybe outside of the industries, every industry could give it a shot and really understand how the customers think about it. And maybe there's some that we will be surprised on. Okay, there's something wouldn't traditionally we wouldn't think about it, but maybe the customers are starting to take messages as the way to go forward.
Yep. I think one interesting use case which comes to my mind is something as ubiquitous as a grocer. And I would urge you to try it out yourself. If you can search up any Walmart store in US from your Google Map, any Google Map phone, right? And that's the beauty of it. When we asked you to kind of search out Partoo, Paris, you didn't have to go through that process of downloading an app or signing up for a service. Because the product is baked in into your normal consumer behavior, Swami didn't have to tell you to kind of go to a particular app, but on your own, you were able to land up into that experience. So similar to that, if you go to Maps and search for any Walmart location, what Walmart has done is very interesting. They don't want to drive people away from their stores, but they have these massive stores where they have more than 10,000 SKUs available, right? And the availability and the pricing and the location within the store constantly keeps on changing. So what they have deployed is a store finder kind of a tool. You go in, you search for any product, you type in chocolate, bananas, right? And what they will do is they have the store level inventory which is mapped out, and they're very efficiently able to fetch that information and relate back to users that saying, hey, you search for bananas and these are the top 10 SKUs which are available, and they're available in this aisle in the store, and this is the pricing and this is the availability issue, right? So now that kind of a tool set, Walmart, people who are coming into the stores, they will be across all age groups, all profiles. They don't want to get them to download apps, right? It will not be efficient path. Yes, if people do that, that's a different thing. But for them, an ability to do it on maps, which potentially a lot of them would have used while coming into the store itself, right? That just adds a layer of customer delight, which wasn't possible earlier.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's wonderful. So but I think we don't have any more new questions. Let's take 30 seconds more. Maybe any last questions, anything we may have missed out on. If not, of course, we will be sending a replay of the webinar to everybody. And again, okay. So we have a question from Rajesh. It's to you, Ashish.
In the earlier use case you mentioned, as example, once the product is available after a week, you can respond back to user. So the question is, how will customer know he has a response from the store unless he visits again? That's a great question. So the way it works is that as long as user is signed into the Google account, right? If most of us, we are using Android devices, or even if you're using iOS, chances are that you'll be using Google Maps. And for most of the services, you would be signed into a Google account. So what happens is, as long as the conversation is initiated by the user, when brand responds to that user, maybe a week after the initial conversation, that kind of pops up as a notification on the user's device. Let me see if I can take you back to the slide where we kind of gave you a glimpse of it. And your users, they get to see that this is a business message which is coming from your brand with your logo. And after that, users can tap into it to get back into the conversation. And once they do that, then it's back to the back to the brand to kind of take the journey ahead. So if I can show you here, the rightmost screen which is there, the message which comes back from the brand, it will come up in this format. It will say business messages, Bridgepoint runners. Hey, there, how's the training going, right? So this is how it happened. I hope that answers your question, Rajesh.
And really, to add to that, Rajesh, it is similar to how Google works even for reviews. So every time when a consumer drops your review on your when a consumer drops a review on your location, if as the brand you reply to the review, they also get the push notification on their mobile saying, "Hey, the brand has responded to your message." So it also goes both ways for messages and for reviews.
Yep, the same design language which is kind of carrying ahead.
Okay, so we have a question from Shailesh. It's on the way. Oh, more of a comment. Thank you, Shailesh. And yeah, so maybe let's while I say the final couple of words, if there's one last question to sneak in there, please do drop it. If not, we'll get back to you with the replay of the webinar. Of course, you'll have all the information on how you could reach out to me. I know the ones who've already asked me to reach out, so I will be dropping you a note shortly. Really, from my end, it's a pleasure to have everyone. Really, thank you so much for taking the time, spending time with us today. I'd like to thank, of course, Ashish and Andy also for taking the time. Always happy to catch up with you guys.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure to be here, and I hope that a lot of no's that we had at the beginning of the session we're able to convert to yes. So yeah, looking forward to connecting with several of you going ahead.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Goodbye.
Bye bye.